It's visible.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. So today I'm going to talk about the importance of biogeochemistry of Indian Ocean and the way forward. So as I'm Vinu Valsala from IITM Pune. So Indian Ocean biogeochemistry, perhaps we all know that this has been very well summarized in the AGU monograph published in 2013, which is a very fundamental summary of Indian Ocean biogeochemistry and nutrient cycling and trace element research happened so far in that time. So that the picture you see on the top left is taken from that the cover page of that book. So you see that this is a satellite picture of primary production in terms of chlorophyll. You see Indian Ocean has a very identified locations of importance of the biological activity in terms of the production. So we all are aware that the Western Arabian Sea is the hotspot of a highly productive region of the Indian Ocean, and in the Bay of Bengal to a part, and then the southeastern tropical Indian Ocean. But if you look at the central to the oligotrophic gyre region, the part is covered with this polygon in the center. Indian Ocean is not contributing much of the biological productivity. So being a tropical ocean and experiencing the monsoonal wind forcing over the ocean, Indian Ocean has a similar response in its biogeochemistry and primary production. So these books perhaps given us, all of us, a great venue to understand how the Indian Ocean biogeochemistry, what are the gap areas and the thrust areas need to input in terms of research. Some of highlighted here said that the book provide the overlying physical processes set by the monsoonal forcing and how this control the biological production and variability in terms of chlorophyll and primary production, nutrient cycle and limitation. So being a tropical ocean and we have a nutrient input from upwelling phenomenon, but due to limitation of certain identified nutrients like iron and silica, our productivity is also limited. And pelagic carbon cycling and an air sea exchange was also a part of that book. I think yeah, most of the Indian Ocean survey in terms of biogeochemistry and carbon cycle happened during the Jacobs cruises, especially in terms of PCO2, for given one of the first glimpses how the Indian Ocean is behaving in terms of its carbon cycle. And the benthic biogeochemistry and ecology through geotraces programs are all sampled many observations and has been summarized in that book. And the impact of climate and human activities on biogeochemistry and ecosystem also touched upon there. So what I'm trying to introduce here is that from there to today, what are the gap that we are left behind? What are the thrust area we need to focus that we, especially in terms of the ongoing climate change issues. On the right top panel shows the recent update of the roadmap to Indus, where they summarized what are the major circulation that we have understood so far in the Indian Ocean, taken from the bombs of Beale et al. 2020. So you see that Indian Ocean is dramatically active due to it's a monsoonal forcing through western boundary currents in the Somali region, and there is a consistent gyre circulation at the south, a lot of subduction happening in the south and a bit in northern Arabian Sea as well. And there is a built around the oxygen minimum zone exists in the Arabian Sea, which is eventually leading to our denitrification problems both in the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. And seasonally sub-season or semi-annual red-key jets, then the equatorial redistribute these nutrients from the left and right directions in the Indian Ocean. Tropical thermocline is rather flat from the east and to the east-west direction, and the Pacific water input through the Indonesian through flow to the Indian Ocean, and cross-equatorial cell, which actually the flushing in and out of the heat and the salt and nutrients of the Indian Ocean. So they are all very important. So far, scientific community have a decent understanding about how these things are working in tandem with the atmospheric forcing. So what is important here, as we all know that Indian Ocean is primary production focused on few areas, as I highlighted from this satellite picture taken from the Curry et al. Paper in BG in 2013. They have summarized, say, for example, in the winter season, December, January, February, due to the convective mixing by the cold air blowing over the north part of the Arabian Sea, the deep convective mixing fuels the primary production in that time in the northern part of the Bay of Bengal, while during the transition season of the monsoon, it is a bit arid in most part of the ocean, except in the very north of Arabian Sea. But when the summer monsoon commences, you see that there is a large production happens in the Western Arabian Sea and in the southern tip of the Sri Lankan area, where if you see my mouse pointer, please see that there is a more the dome mediated pumping of production. You can see that in that area also. Most of the Indian coastal region experiences upwelling. The season also increases the productivity there. So this is further enhanced and sustained in the September, October, November, further to the Arabian coast. So as you see, because of the reminiscent of whatever nutrient being brought up, and that is being contributed further into the primary production. This mean picture is pretty clear from our satellite observation, and this paper has pointed out that, however, during extreme IOD years, you may also experience around 50% additional productivity in the southeastern Arabian Sea coast, for example, here. So this is a satellite summary of anomalies of September, October, November 97, December, January, February 98, and March, April, May 90, and in the following, March, April, May 98, and December, January, February 98, and September, October 97 to 98 progression. You see there's a very good built up of warm positive anomalies of chlorophyll concentration in tandem with the IOD. So interannually also Indian Ocean is experiencing much variability in the biogeochemistry. Unlike before this study, it was more noted for the Pacific Ocean, but in papers in 1999, Murthugude et al., and then later the summarized perhaps in detail with longer records by Curry et al. In 2013, you can see that Indian Ocean is also very active. Year to year, there's a lot of variability exists in the primary production and chlorophyll concentration as observed by the satellite. Now, recently, our own study by Roxy et al. Has pointed out an alarming situation in the Indian Ocean, that if you focus in the Western Arabian Sea, the hotbed of the Indian Ocean productivity, there is a alarming decrease of primary production happening. Especially, we detected it from the recent satellite, also from the past 60 years of model simulation, and that is going well in hand with what we see as a warming pattern of the Arabian Sea or the Western Indian Ocean. So the Indian Ocean has warmed much more than any other tropical Indian Ocean due to many other climate and dynamical or atmospheric ocean coupled dynamical reasons. But this warming is perhaps arresting much of the input of nutrient back to the surface in terms of entrainment and mixing processes, which can decline the productivity. So that paper highlighted that this can be a quite alarming situation for the Northern Indian Ocean. But if you project such properties, however, studies also indicate that future primary production of Western Arabian Sea may increase also due to change in the local winds, change in the winds due to climate change. Why? What happens due to climate change is that the land-ocean contrast is going to be modified in accordance with our monsoonal wind may get amplified, or there may be an increase in the wind, or there is a shift in the low level jet to the northern direction. That is what most of the climate models suggest. So accordingly, there will be the changes in the net upwelling experiencing in the Western Arabian Sea. So even if in the satellite observations may show there is a declining in this chlorophyll concentration, but there may be a further increase in the primary production in the Western Arabian Sea in the future due to the realignment of the wind jet axis in this particular region, which is actually a realignment of the shift in the monsoon circulation atmospheric winds pattern, for example. So there is a critical point in this particular paper we have looked at actually in Praveen et al. 2018, that if we have if you look at the future minus present scenario of downscaled climate model. So this is not a pure climate model as it is from the CMIP 5. We have further downscaled to a very high resolution using ROM simulations, and then we contrasted what happens by future minus present upwelling indices in this Oman and Somali coast. So it says that in the Oman coast especially, there is going to be an increase in the upwelling by 2100. This may further offset the reduction in the primary production due to the stability of the water column, what we have discussed in the past. So there are contradicting influences happening over the biogeochemistry of the Indian Ocean, which has to be looked at in much more research. So the resilience of Arabian Sea primary production to climate change has to be looked into by more downscaling model experiment is one thing we need to address. Now, if you come to the biological production in the upwelling zones per se in the Indian Ocean, so what are our our understanding, even after those the monograph from 2013 to today, where are we standing today? We still have to say or admit there is no consistent observational estimate of the new and export production of the key upwelling zones of the tropical Indian Ocean, say either it in the Western Arabian Sea or the ACTR region, Sri Lankan Dome region, or the southeastern, South Java, Sumatra region. Our estimate still have a large uncertainty in the new production. Say, for example, in terms of gram carbon meter square per year, how much new production happens? If one asks a question, how much uncertainty we have in our estimate is also a question. Especially a global ocean biochemical community, or sorry, Indian Ocean biochemical community should come forward and to come up with more measurement and a more robust estimate to this kind of unknowns, like new production, how much Indian Ocean is contributing. And this is a sizable amount if you consider other tropical or global oceans. So, for example, Western Arabian Sea alone, 133 plus or minus 20 gram carbon per meter square per year is a new production estimate we have arrived through various available model and observational data available. So this is taken from our recent paper in 2018 in BG about quantifying the new production in the upwelling zones of the Indian Ocean. Now, coming to the second important problem is how critical is Arabian Sea denitrification. There has not been much attention to this subject, perhaps in the last 5 to 10 years, I guess. There has been tremendous studies happened in the early 90s and late 1990s. Saying that Arabian Sea is noted as a denitrification zone, and perhaps if you calculate what is the net denitrification occurring in the global ocean, you find Arabian Sea one of the hotspot as equivalent to the denitrification you see in the Californian current system in those particular regions. So what is plotted here is a typical conservative tracer called N star, which is a measure of denitrification. The more negative or intense N star is representing more denitrification situations. So Arabian Sea share one of the major hotspot of the denitrification in the Indian Ocean. So there are various estimates how much teragram of nitrogen per year is actually denitrified through these oxygen minima condition existing in the Arabian Sea. They have large uncertainty looming around. Say, for example, in the recent estimate, we have tried this again with the 2009 or 10 observation from CMLRE. We also come up with not much confidence, large uncertainty of plus or minus 7 teragram to a 25 mean teragram denitrification estimate. So this has to be given more thrust in the Indian Ocean. Communities asked to come forward and do much more analysis in this to assess the basin-wide the status, especially in the growing size of the oxygen minimum zone of this particular basin, is very important, I would say. And if you look at this is a recent measurement from CMLRE that nitrate profile from those boxes sampled along this particular northern part of the Arabian Sea. See that there is a clear decrease of nitrate concentration with subsequent nitrate in buildup, seeing that there is in the very low oxygen condition, saying that there is a denitrification strongly ongoing, and as we were detected in the past. But how much change to this happening is perhaps very important to look at. We anticipate much more denitrification intensifying with the enhancing in the oxygen minima area. And this is the particular N star of that particular observations we have got from this Arabian Sea. Now, what are the limiting nutrients in the North Indian Ocean, especially in the Arabian Sea? We have looked at whether the silicate or the iron is limiting, or what are the limiting conditions for the nitrate and ammonia. This is another major unknown. How the Arabian Sea productivity is fueled by the new production, and how they are regulated by the availability of these limiting nutrients. So with the modeling experiments, we are able to do such a thing. What we have done here in this case is that we separated the influence due to the new production and regenerated production and the silicate limitation in fueling the Arabian Sea productivity, not just for the surface, but for the entire upper euphotic zone of the ocean, because that can be achieved if you have a very good modeling tool in your hand. So doing so, what we have found is that with Arabian Sea majority is supplied by the nutrient cycle due to the new production. So if the new production is suppressed, Arabian Sea productivity cannot be simulated in any particular model. But regenerated production can have only an impact from plus or minus 10% only. But more than 50% changes you see in the model, in the productivity, if you regulate the the nitrate dependent production in the model. Silica, however, controls a large amount of production in the Arabian Sea. What we have noted is that if silicate is not provided properly to the biogeochemistry system, and the ecosystem cannot function, and there will be a severe silicate limited production, production limitation will be observing in the Arabian Sea. So the percentage change in the plankton biomass. So with respect to these controlling parameters, such as whether it's a nitrate mediated, or it's an ammonium regenerated mediated, or it's a silicate mediated, tells us that basically the nitrate mediated production dominates in the Arabian Sea, and it is so important. So when we couple this with the denitrification, expanding oxygen minima, and the productivity, this become very important, that we have to further monitor how these changes happening in this ecosystem of the Arabian Sea. Now we have we could summarize through our experiment that if you see how the various plankton communities, whether it is flagellates or diatom or zooplankton, small, large, or predatory, any type of, so in a controlled environment, I mean in the existing mean environment, there is a nice balance exists between the productivity of all by sharing the given amount of nitrogen in the system. But if you perturb it to, say for example, if you suppress your nitrate to, which you see that all of the primary producers and secondary producers are shrinking in their size. But if you suppress, however, the regenerator production, you see surprisingly that the secondary producers, especially the large planktons, are surviving even by grazing by the zooplankton large, which can graze on the phytoplankton small, that means flagellate type of thing. So how this ecosystem is intertwined across the various limitation factor, our current understanding in the northern Indian Ocean is rather limited. That is what we are understanding. We have a nice modeling and observational collective approach. We can look at these important factors. Now the last plot in this panel shows that if you have no silicate limitation imposed, our secondary production would have been increased to much larger in the Arabian Sea. So silicate limitation is very critical, and to regulate or to understand what is the existing ecological cycle of nutrients among the various plankton community, the silicate limitation is becoming important. This is perhaps one of the first studies pointed out how silicate limitation is so critical in the prey-predatory relations of the plankton in the Arabian Sea. For example, what we summarize is that the multi-species, the nitrate offers a fundamental limitation in the Arabian Sea ecosystem. That is point number one. So therefore, it gives much thrust to the measuring more nitrate in a high quality accuracy way. We have to monitor them in the Arabian Sea, and also the multi-species dependent hydrotrophic organism, example copypods and ephacids, which perhaps they withstand the nutrient limitation. So that's important, because as the climate change ongoing, how these various ecosystem functioning by self-regulating their loops, that is we are quite unknown in the Arabian Sea or the North Indian Ocean. We need more thrust area to pump up this type of studies. So we are saying that they may withstand, some of these species may withstand nutrient limitation as compared to the single species dependent organism like silate, for example. So this has been published recently from our group. Now coming to the fourth point, what is the status of the approach and carbon cycle? This is a large uncertainty exists in the estimates of the approach and carbon cycle in the Indian Ocean. So this cartoon I always flash in many of my talks in India, for example. So this is a cartoon showing how the approach and carbon cycle is built in any system. So we have a solubility pump derived system in which the direct action of the wind and the concentration of the carbon in the atmosphere is able to dissolve into the ocean due to the chemical equilibrium, and then further within the ocean, the biology takes over. It converts into biological pump and solubility, and biological pump, which is soft tissue, and carbonate pump, which sinks interior or export the approach carbon interior, but the fixed carbon. Further, the bacterial decomposition and remineralization happens within it, and the dynamic return of the ocean bringing back to the surface. So this cycling is so essential to maintain the ecosystem the balance in any tropical or any part of the global ocean. Now, what is important is that there are two aspects we need to think about here. One, there are the uncertainties still looming around in the calculation of how much air sea flux we are exchanging across the tropical Indian Ocean. There are hardly any data to come to that point. So we have to we have to really increase our observation to understand those. And then how much is the new production happening in the Indian Ocean has to be estimated better, and the export fluxes also has to be estimated better. So this is a kind of a the existing observational mean of the air sea fluxes in the Indian Ocean from Takahashi map. But although we say there is an observational climatology exists, there is a large emission of carbon fluxes in the Western Arabian Sea and moderate fluxes in the other season. How much data has gone into this? That's actually critical. So this is a summary of the last 30 years of SOCAT data, which is available for, so far to us, and it shows that Indian Ocean is hardly sampled in the recent past. Most of the sampling happened in the Jacobs era, but we are not sampling the PCO2 or related data from Indian Ocean recently, and this large data gap is going to affect our robustness in our estimate. And Indus for recently released their wish list of 2020-2030, that what are their plans for measuring the Indian Ocean. They have introduced more lines for the pH measurements and PCO2 measurements in the Indian Ocean. So the point is that if you look at how the voluntary ships measure the Indian Ocean is still a void. This I have been flashing since for a long time in the Indian community. This has to be filled. You see that how much void Indian Ocean has in terms of voluntary measurements of PCO2. So if you have such data, we have system to assimilate and improve our understanding of the air sea budgeting of the carbon in the ocean. Now, due to by identifying these needs, we have recently proposed we need to immediately start certain observational programs in the Indian Ocean for making PCO2 measurements. Either it is through ship track measurements or moored instrument measurements. So we have done an OSSC experiment to propose certain buoys can be focused with immediately, so we can install instruments and start measuring carbon to improve our understanding. So some details, I'm not reading it further, can be found from this paper, for example. And the last point perhaps is the Indian Ocean acidification, and a very interesting study recently done by Tariq et al. From NCPOR published a paper saying how the Lakshadweep measured boron isotope can be translated into pH measurements, and they show a surprising result. Unlike what we know conventionally, the global ocean acidification is increasing. They have found large variability in the pH data in the measurements. Measurements means boron isotope converted proxy data for surface ocean pH. But if you look at the model of what we have in our hand, either OTTM, which is our model, or this is an European model, ETH soda, none of them show such large variability. So that means it tells us that we need to really improve models to resolve such large variability in pH. And to improve models, we need observation. This is perhaps the one of the first longest time series of pH available to the Indian Ocean from this very interesting paper. So when we compare, our models are not performing well. So we need to improve. That's our future perspective. Now, from the existing estimate, the Indian Ocean, tropical Indian Ocean trends in the acidification by our own modeling efforts says that roughly 0.054 pH in last 34. Yes, I understand. The 35. 34 years, but this quantity is as equal to the global trend in acidification. That means Indian Ocean acidification is as equal to the rest of the global acidification. As an important point, we need to keep an attention, keep an attention to the how Indian Ocean is acidifying and what are the controlling factors. So this is a typical model output of how the Indian Ocean being acidified, a comparison of OTTM, which is our model effort, and ETH soda is a neural network based data from European community. Both show very consistent tropical Indian Ocean acidification since 1985 to 2015. However, surprisingly, none of these model estimate compare well with the real observed boron isotope trend derived pH. Now we have, so another alarming factor is that the amplification of the temperature itself, SST itself, can control the pH due to the reaction or the balance of the carbonic reaction in surface water. We have also proved in the past that if the Indian Ocean trend in pH is very well correlated with the trend in SST. This is something quite alarming. This is nothing to do with the anthropogenic component, but how the ocean itself warms may add additional thrust, 16 to 20% thrust to ongoing ocean acidification. Now, this is one particular snapshot I want to invite the community's attention. This is how the model and observation perform today. This is our own model OTTM, and this is a Bay of Bengal ocean acidification pH comparison. This is only pH record direct measurement measurement, not a proxy record, available so far in 2014 to 2016. So you see that models are not capturing many of the variabilities, not even a decent seasonal cycle. So there is a lot of room for models to improve. So what we say we have to tell is that we need to improve our observations. Then only modelers can go further and improve our model to find out where is what we are missing and how to improve it further. So I think I am out of time, and I also am already reached my conclusions and future direction. So my task was to introduce the important significance of biogeochemistry and its future direction. So I would say that sustainable and long-term observations of ocean biogeochemistry, say it be in situ, mooring, or autonomous instrument, ship of opportunity, it needs thrust in the coming decades. This we cannot wave off this thrust, because it is very important. We need to focus highly on sustainable measurements, and there should be a synergy among the modeling and observational community. More modeling community should evolve by learning from the observational people, and that has to be evolved and initiated. And more training of young researchers and scholars in ocean BGs is also important. I think that is what lacking so far. We are not very sure how many research groups are taking up the acidification problem and for our related problems in the Indian Ocean. So we need to improve this. So before I conclude, I thank OSICON for allowing me. This is a very great honor for giving an invited talk here in this venue. And I thank my students and scholars and colleagues and collaborators across India and various other universities and institutes in the globe. And we invite you to visit this website where we report all our findings with much more details. You can learn learn about our research, etc. And thank you very much. Thank you, Bhaskar, for reminding me about the time.
Thank you.